Very much, Laskin Corla. Rents rise by a record 14.1% annually on back of extreme shortage of rental homes. Housing starts fall again in October as costs rise. Housing crisis is putting education at risk, says unions. That's just a flavour of the headlines that we woke up to this morning. And yesterday, Monday, was a typical Monday for me, and probably a typical Monday for most TDs as we start our weekly clinics. One young woman with 3 kids and a partner at her wit's end. She has an eviction notice received in October. She's out of her rented home in April with nowhere affordable to rent. She's going to have to split up the family. She's on the council housing list 9 years and there's no sign of anything from the local authority. Another woman, single, living in a substandard 2-room flat in a building with 3 other men, scared stiff with fear because of aggression and intimidation that she has to experience from one of them. And the landlord doesn't care. Nowhere else to go because there's nowhere else to rent, nowhere that's affordable. And at the rate of building, she could be on the housing waiting list for at least another 4 years. And 4 years, Minister, is what it took to house somebody from start to finish, from their application to the conclusion of the process, when I first became a public representative back in 1999. Sometimes 3, but at the higher end 4. And most heartbreaking of all was a case that I dealt with directly last week. A woman and her 2 young children who were being evicted from their home. They're on the council housing waiting list a few years, and in order to help, I found myself speaking over a period of days with the woman's son, a young child in his teens. He was advocating for his mother. And since last week, he and his sibling and their mum are one of the 11,000 who are homeless in Ireland. And Minister, I think, and I know you would agree, that no child should have to grow up that fast and take on the responsibility of advocating for his family who are being made homeless. But that's the reality. That's where we are now, and it is shameful. And yet the government still refuses to mouth the word emergency. Crisis, disaster, emergency. Ireland's housing situation is frankly all of those things. And just ask the people that I do my best to represent. There's nothing short of a catastrophe for them. And I don't actually care what it's called. I don't think anybody in here really cares what it's called and how we describe it, as long as it is fixed. But it's not getting fixed, and it's nowhere close to being fixed. And the Taoiseach's response, Minister, to Deputy Ivana Bacik's questions, at Leader's questions today, was revealing. The Labour leader had the temerity to remind the Taoiseach that it's the government that bears responsibility for ensuring that everyone has an affordable home, a secure home. And that's a role that government is failing to perform. Now, she welcomed the government's U-turn in the adoption of Labour policy on an eviction ban. And she rightly welcomed last weekend's reports of impending, if belated, changes to income limits for local authority housing. Yet the Taoiseach bizarrely hit back by claiming we had no plans to fix the housing crisis and we weren't being constructive. Just because he doesn't like our plans and he doesn't agree with them doesn't mean we don't have a plan. The Taoiseach's running out of road. I think this government is running out of road, and the facts don't lie. Housing for all simply isn't delivering the rate of building we need. And now the Taoiseach has resorted to blaming the opposition for the abject failures of government housing policy. You could not make this up. This is absolutely delusional. And a plan with an underspend of almost €500 million in a year where we will see the ignominy of the highest rates of homelessness ever recorded isn't a plan that's working. A plan that has to date in 2022 failed to spend €228 million of the money the Dáil allocated to the housing budget this year for council housing isn't a plan that's working. Now, a home isn't an investment. It should not always be viewed as a commodity. And the government needs to stop seeing housing primarily as something that the market will fix, as a commodity, as an opportunity to merely profit. And for too many it is. And I want to share another example with you of an experience in my own constituency. Just 2 weeks ago in Drogheda, we rumbled a landlord who was openly advertising up to 20 bunk beds for rent in what was a standard, slightly extended family home, and all for the price of €500 a month for a bunk bed, sharing a room with 3 or 4 other people in a house that would be absolutely rammed. Now, at our behest, the council intervened and took a form of action. That disgusting, greedy enterprise has now collapsed, but with record rents to collect and no explicit laws on overcrowding, no legal definition, there's nothing stopping someone else from trying this on. And this is the reality of housing in this country in 2022. And it should come as no shock to government that these failings on housing are being exploited by far-right xenophobes across Ireland for their own disgraceful ends. Now, the government has overseen rents rise by 14% in 1 year, and all it takes is a look at the government's own recent report to see that Housing for All is failing, and it's failing ordinary working people. We know that 11,000 people are recorded in informal homelessness figures, and that's rising. 60,000 are on social housing waiting lists. There will be more when the income thresholds are adjusted as they ought to be. And housing insecurity is pervasive across all parts of Irish society. Even those we assume to be well paid are crippled under the weight of the rental sector, and the most vulnerable are drowning in it. Now, the state has abdicated its responsibility and placed its trust, in my view, disproportionately in private landlords and in the private sector, the market, to deliver, when only the state has the authority, the scale and the mandate to crack an emergency of this scale and seriousness, and to definitively deal with it. It's why we said in our alternative budget, or costed budget, that we produce every year. It's why we said this year in our alternative budget that an additional €1.5 billion should be spent next year on social and affordable housing and on ramping up cost rental. Now, the state needs to revolutionise its approach by drastically scaling up and prioritising social, affordable and cost rental homes, reducing its reliance on the private sector, moving HAP tenants into social housing and bringing an end to no-fault evictions. Now, our support for this motion goes way beyond the demonstration organised by my colleagues in the trade union movement on Saturday. It goes way beyond ending no-fault evictions, and it goes far beyond a rent freeze and eviction ban. It goes to the very core of Irish housing policy. The Labour Party and our fellow opposition parties are calling for a fundamental shift in how the state views housing. No tinkering around the edges. That's all been tried. A fundamental shift. That's what's required. And we make no apologies whatsoever for affirming that housing is not an investment. Housing is first and foremost, and always should be, about a home. We will always prioritise the rights of tenants and people to safety, warmth and shelter over the ability for landlords in the private market to make a fortune passively off the backs of vulnerable people. And the state has a moral duty to care for its people. It is the very essence of the social contract. It's the glue that binds the social contract together. And Irish people agree to abide by the norms of society in return for protection and the vindication of their rights. And when the state fails to vindicate their rights, the government can't expect everyone to be quiet, to be docile and to move on. So we urge everyone to join us, to join our trade union colleagues, to join everyone of goodwill who is serious about a step change, a revolutionary change. Change, in fact, it shouldn't really be considered revolutionary, but a revolutionary change nonetheless when compared to the policies of this government. We want everyone to join us to raise the roof on the 26th of November in Dublin. We need to show the government something simple. Housing for all is, whether you like it or not, failing. The evidence shows that. The experience shows that. And the state needs to step up and build the homes we need, reduce rents and value housing as a home and not an investment.